Okay, today we are with Eddie Click from Lenoir City. Eddie is the oldest son of Glenn and Polly Click. He's been a minister for several years, still works at the funeral home some, so we're going to talk today about his family and his ministry. First of all, thanks for doing this, Eddie. So tell me about your mom and dad, and we'll start with your mom, Polly Click.
Well, Mom and Daddy both were from Sweetwater area, McMinn County area. They both grew up down there. Both went to Lenoir City High, or McMinn County High School. After Mama graduated high school, she went to Trevecca College in Nashville for a few years. She was a Nazarene.
Mm-hmm.
Daddy was too, growing up. I guess that may have been how they met too, other than school.
Mm-hmm.
Mama went down there and stayed about a year, and Daddy was in the embalming school in Nashville. So I guess they continued seeing each other down there. But then Daddy, I think when he was in high school, he worked for a funeral home in Athens, and then after he graduated, he went to Nashville to embalming school. And as soon as he graduated embalming school, he came to Lenoir City, him and Mama, and he started work for Guy F. Talent Funeral Home in 1949. I was 6 months old when they moved up here.
Well, what were some of the jobs that your mom did at the funeral home?
Well, my mom was a jack of all trades. First of all, she's probably the best cook I've ever. She at the funeral home a lot of days she'd have lunch for 25, 30 people, just like it was nothing. But growing up, she worked at Cobb's, which was a men's and women's store downtown. I think she worked for Allen's department stores, a men and women's store. She worked there. She was over the concession stand for Lenoir City Little League for years and years and years when me and Stevie played. So mostly she's just a housewife and worked at the funeral home.
Yeah. Now, at the funeral home, did she have any jobs there?
She was a secretary.
Okay.
Her and Daddy would go out when they weren't busy and visit. They'd go down in Cave Creek, Dogwood. They'd go all over the place just visiting people, telling them they're starting out a funeral home in Lenoir City when they started out.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about your dad and starting out at Guy Talent Funeral Home.
Yeah, he started in 1949. Still run ambulance service back then. That's how I got started. When I got old enough to pick up a cot, about 12 years old, I started running ambulance service with him. He worked at Talent Funeral Home till about 1966, I guess, is where we went out on our own. And then after we went out on, well, after 1966, him and Cecil Carnes from Carnes Funeral Home in Loudon bought out Talent Funeral Home, remodeled it and everything. It was in business together, and Cecil had more interest in the funeral home, money-wise, than Daddy did. And he come on to buy Daddy out, like to kill Daddy. But that's when we went over on East Broadway and bought an old duplex house where Broadway Flower Shop is now, and remodeled it and made it into a funeral home.
But who were some of the people that worked at the Guy Talent Funeral Home that
Oh gosh,
our listeners might have?
Growing up, it was, I don't know if you'd say they worked there or they hung out there, but G.L. Hall went on Hall Motor Company. Bill Bowden's Daddy owned Bowden's flower shop. Gut Reynolds, Clifton Williams. Golly, but having a hard time thinking of everybody now. This man Jerry Tyler, who's a great basketball player at Lenoir City.
So there were some characters that worked there?
Oh gosh, there's characters. The men that worked there too was characters. But they mostly helped run ambulance service. When Daddy got an ambulance call, he'd pick up one of them boys that was there and take them with him. Sometimes it'd be 2 or 3 go with him.
And they did not have any formal training.
Oh no,
for
no.
pickups.
Back then, none of us had any formal training in the ambulance service. All we could do is hold a towel over somebody that's bleeding and give them oxygen if it's having trouble breathing. Sometimes that's the wrong thing to do. I remember taking a man to the hospital one time, got there, and they said, "You almost killed him." I said, he had something wrong with his lungs where you can't give him oxygen. It made him fill up with fluid. So after that, we didn't want to give people oxygen anymore either.
The location of the first Click's funeral home, you said, is the Bowden's Florist.
No, it's
Where it's
Broadway Florist.
Broadway Florist, where that is located. And then your dad bought the old East Side School?
Yeah, Walnut Street School.
Walnut Street School.
It started out as East Side School, and then just about everybody today knows it's Walnut Street, because we put a sign up at front, or the historical committee put a sign up saying it was the site of East Side School. People come by there and say, "We never knew this was an East Side School. We always thought it was Walnut Street School." But that part of town's always called East Side, still called East Side.
So, you were telling me earlier that it was only one floor at that time, correct?
The funeral home?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and it was divided up into 2 apartments. And before we ever got a chance to remodel it, we got 2 death calls. So we had somebody on one side and somebody on the other side. If you was going to see one, you had to go in one door. If you had to go see the other, you were sitting in the other door. And the rooms were little. It was just like a living room and a bedroom. And nobody complained, I don't guess. But we finally got the walls knocked out of it eventually. But it was one floor. We had, if somebody passed away, we'd have to carry the caskets in out of the garage and set them up in the chapel for people to look at the caskets. Then we'd take all the caskets back out in the garage so we could have a funeral. And then after the funeral, we'd have to carry the chairs in out of the garage, set the chairs up so we could have the service itself.
Yeah. Now, your family lived there at one time, correct?
No, we never lived in that. We lived where the old, where the Sonic is now.
Oh, okay.
It's in front of the old Dr. Pepper plant.
Okay.
And it was the people that owned the Dr. Pepper plant's house. We lived in it for a while.
Now, as the years went by, once you had the upstairs finished, you and Bobby Carroll and your family lived there, correct?
Now that was when we moved to Walnut Street.
Yeah.
We lived downstairs.
Okay.
When I was first started there, we didn't have an upstairs. We had the downstairs, which was the old boiler room for the Walnut Street School. And Daddy had it remodeled for him and Mama, and they lived there. And then he moved out, and then me and Bobby Carroll and our family moved down there. Lived down there for several years.
For those who don't know, tell them where Talent Funeral Home was located, what it is now.
Talent Funeral Home is right across from the post office. It's where Woody Martin's Victory Temple is now. And on one side of it was Dr. Shea's medical building. Medical building's still there. Just probably 15, 20 feet from it on the other side was Bowden's Flower Shop.
Okay. So what do you remember about Guy Talent? He was mayor at one time.
He was mayor. In fact, it seemed like Guy was, of course back then we thought anybody was over 50 years old was old.
Yeah.
When I first started working there at 12, I thought he was old. Then he's a little guy. He was a good funeral director, but he was the mayor of Lenoir City for years. The gymnasium out at the high school's Guy F. Talent Gymnasium. I think something else at the school. The new high school was built. I think he was still mayor then. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was 66 or something like that.
Well, I graduated out of the old high school in '67. That was the last year of the old high school.
So I guess 68.
My brother Stevie was in the first year at the new high school.
Okay.
That's when the gymnasium blew up.
Yeah.
And I was in bombing school and heard it on CNN, scared me to death.
What was it like, really, growing up in the funeral home business?
Well, I didn't know. That's all I knew. But I started work when I was 12. I was working night funerals, just opened the door when they received friends and stuff. And then if I got a death call or got an ambulance call, I'd go with Daddy on it, or Wiley Vaughn or Frank Johnson that worked there. God never went on any ambulance calls that I knew. I never knew him to go on a death call when I was over there. But it was different. We lived upstairs over Talent Funeral Home for several years too.
Okay. Click's Funeral Home, it's been a family business since the inception and still is today.
Yeah.
Tell me what your jobs were. You were talking about working there.
At Talent or Click?
At Click's all the way through embalming school.
I was a junior in high school when we moved, remodeled the old Walnut Street School and moved in. And my job back then was just about the same as it'd been at Talon's. I'd work, work funerals, work receiving friends, go on ambulance calls, work funerals if I was out of school. Daddy always wanted me to help him embalm the body. He's always wanted me to show me the right way to do everything. Daddy was a really good embalmer. He's really good.
What's the secret of being a good embalmer?
A good embalmer?
Yeah.
I guess patience, especially if there's any restorative art into it. Somebody's been in a wreck or shooting or something, you have to rebuild something.
Yeah.
I guess patience.
Tell me about your other family members who've continued to work at Clicks through the years.
Well,
now.
See, Daddy had 3 brothers, J.D., Jimmy, and Tom. Were all film directors and embalmers. Tom's still alive. He owns McCammon Evans Click in Maryville. He went to work right there out of high school.
That's Mo's dad, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Mo Click's dad. He used to be a trainer for UT. But he's still alive. He's not well enough. I think he goes in the morning and sits there and then goes home. But he's on that funeral home himself probably for 35, 40 years. And then J.D. and Tom worked for Daddy till J.D. got into politics. Then when I got out of embalming school, Jimmy went to Maryville and went to work for Tom because he didn't need both of us.
Right.
So he went to work, and then I've got a son, Chris, who's a funeral director and embalmer. Tim's got a son who's a funeral director and embalmer. My brother Tim's a funeral director and embalmer. My brother Larry's a funeral director. He never went to embalming school.
So Tim, he pretty much manages.
Tim and my sister Glenda really run the funeral home now.
Okay. And then Larry, he's kind of separate though, isn't he?
Yeah, he owned Farragut, Click Farragut at the old Methodist Church in Farragut, and then he went out and out on Middlebrook and opened Click Funeral Home there.
Okay.
And he's recently sold out his interest in both of them. Well, he owned McCammon Funeral Home in Loudon, McGill, McGill Click. They started that down there, and the McGill girls still run it. But he sold out all of his interest and everything. I think he still has to work at the funeral home for so long. But.
Okay. You remember Lamb's Eye Daily?
Oh gosh. Lenoir City had more characters growing up, but I guess all small towns did growing up. You probably remember characters in Loudon, but
yeah. Lamb's
Eye started digging graves for us. Couldn't read, couldn't write, didn't have a driver's license. When he started digging graves for us, he bought an old pickup truck, and he painted on the side of it, "If your heart don't tick, call Click. Here comes Lamb's Eye with his pick." So Daddy had to pay to have his truck painted to get that sign off from it, but everybody knew Lamb's Eye. He could play a piano by ear. He'd beat it to death. He could play a harmonica. Not to read or write or anything. He could do a lot of things, but he was a real character.
Do you have any stories about funerals, something odd or funny that's happened down through the years that kind of pops out?
Oh gosh, I always wish Daddy had written a book because he'd tell stories. But I remember one night when we was at Talent Funeral Home. I think we were living upstairs then, but a lady had died down in Roane County, and she'd kind of been over from being sick so long. And they asked Daddy, said, we'd like for you to get her straightened out as much as you can in the casket. And Daddy said, well, I don't break any bones or cut anything, but he said, I'll see what I could do. So when we was dressing her, he took a belt strap and put it around here and under the mattress of the casket to hold her down before we put her clothes on her, and then he raised her feet up, and it looked like she was laying flat in the casket. But about 2 o'clock in the morning, the people called from down there, wanted Daddy to come down there real quick, said the woman had sat up in the casket. The belt had broke.
Let's go back to your schooling. Tell me about where you went to elementary and high school.
I went to Nichols School. Back then Nichols was grade 1 through 8. And then after Nichols I went to North Sea High School. We didn't have middle school or anything then. Then after high school I went to John A. Gupton Mortuary School in Nashville. And then after I was called to preach, I went to Carson Newman, to the Carson Newman preacher school at night for about 3 years.
Now, in high school, you were the athlete.
Not really.
Tell us about what you played.
I played football up until I was a freshman. And I can remember one of the first football practices, I was playing a defensive back, and I intercepted the ball, and I was running down the sideline with it, and Calvin Clemens come out of nowhere, and he hit me, knocked me into the benches over at the old Civitan field and up against the fence. I tried to stand up, my legs just buckled under me. So when I finally got where I could stand up, I walked to the old field house out there and hung my uniform up, went home. But I played basketball for 3.5 years, Coach Smalley, and I played baseball for 4 years for Coach Brandon, Casey Brandon. Baseball was probably my best sport.
Tell us about Coach Brandon.
Coach Brandon, everybody called him Casey, but he knew baseball. He came here, I believe he went to school at Florida, college in Florida, and played in Florida. But when he first come up here, I think he helped coach baseball, and helped coach football and basketball, but then he just become the baseball coach. But he was a really good baseball coach.
He and Earl Fox.
Do what?
He and Earl Fox coached a lot together, didn't they?
And we had a lot of characters that hung around the ball field back then.
Oh, yeah.
Back then too. But, I started playing baseball when Dan Caldwell came here when I was probably 8 or 9 years old and had 2 boys, and we didn't have any kind of little league or anything. And he organized our first little league. So I played baseball from then on up through high school.
So, of the teachers and coaches you had, who made the biggest impression on you?
I'd say it's Coach Smalley and Coach Brandon. But if I had to pick one, it'd be Coach Smalley. Coach Smalley just, he could coach you hard, but he loved you too. He helped you not just to grow into a sport, but to grow into a person. And I've always admired Coach Smalley.